Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern, and today we're diving into part two of our fascinating conversation with Mike Doran. Last week, when Mike was on the show, it ended with Assad still in power in Syria, and so much has happened in such a short amount of time. It feels like we're watching a Netflix series, only this is actually happening. Mike is a distinguished senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, where he focuses on Middle East security issues, the U.S. foreign policy as well. He frequently appears on major TV networks as an expert on Middle Eastern affairs and has served as an advisor to world leaders on strategic policy matters. I'm thrilled to have him back to continue the discussion about the rapidly changing events in Syria and how they impact Israel, the region, the United States, and the world. Welcome back, Mike, to Nothing But the Truth.
Great to be here. Thank you, Trudy.
Well, so much has happened in the last week since we spoke. Things have advanced quite significantly since you were on the show. Rebels were advancing towards Homs. Assad was still in power. Israel was not in the playing field. Can you give us an update of where things are now?
Well, the worst thing about what's happened last week is that my prediction was totally wrong. I always have my eye on the prize here, which is getting the story right, regardless of what the story is. I thought that they were going to. I was certain, on the basis of the way the Syrian civil war has played out in the past, I was certain that the rebels were going to stop at Homs and the line would be held there. I thought I can't remember when we spoke it. I thought they were going to hold the line at Hama, and I thought that the Turkish policy was just to give a jolt to the Russians and the Iranians and Assad, create conditions that would allow them to send some of the refugees back, and also create conditions that would allow them to negotiate with Trump when he was inaugurated to to get rid of the YPG, that is the YPG PKK autonomous area in northeast in northeast Syria. But lo and behold, they went all the way to Damascus, and Assad the regime had been totally hollowed out, more than we realized, more than I realized. And Assad is no more. I'm not mourning him. It's good for the world, good for the Syrian people, good for Israel. I don't think that there's a single bad element there, a single downside to Assad being destroyed. If we look at it from the Israeli point of view, I think also from the American, but let's just situate ourselves in Jerusalem. This is a huge blow to Iran's resistance axis, which is Iran and all of its allies. The Assad regime was the major hub through which Iran entered the Arab world. The elimination of the Assad regime severely weakens Hezbollah, which is the dominant military element of the Iranian resistance axis, threatening Israel. Hezbollah threatens Israel militarily even more than Iran itself does. Iran itself has this nuclear program that we're worried about. It has these missiles and drones and ballistic missiles that can be very troubling to Israel. But the really serious military threat, immediate military threat, was Hezbollah. Now, Israel had hollowed it out significantly on its own, Hezbollah I'm talking about. But now that Assad is gone, it's going to be that much harder for Hezbollah to reconstitute itself. So the balance of power, if we're looking at this from the point of view of Jerusalem, the balance of power between Iran and Jerusalem has shifted significantly in favor of Israel. And so that's extremely good news. The Israelis are a bit worried. You hear it, Israelis and pro-Israelis are worried about the new regime. They have concerns. They're watching with a very concerned eye about the new regime that's developing in Damascus, run by HTS. This is Tahrir Sham, which is an offshoot of al-Qaeda. The guy leading it, Mohammed al-Jolani, has moved away from al-Qaeda. He's kind of he's not he's more of a kind of nationalist Islamist, if you will, rather than a global participant in the global jihad. But his past and his general inclinations make everybody nervous. He has consolidated power in Damascus, and he's setting up the new government there. There's concerns in the international community and among Syrians, including Syrians who participated in the ouster of Assad, that he is setting up a kind of exclusive government that will not reflect the society as a whole, or even the coalition of militias that fought to oppose him. And I could say a few words about Turkey too, but why don't I kick it back to you and see if anything I said there has sparked a particular question on your mind.
Yeah, so actually it has sparked. So head of the HTS his name is Golani. So first of all, that should signal to all of us that
sounds like an Israeli general, Golani.
Well, he took that name because his family was thrown out of the Golan Heights. So I have to think that there is a deep hostility against Israel, which has now just taken back Mount Hermon and the Golan Heights. So that has to be some sort of difficulty that Israel is definitely concerned about. The fact that he was ex-ISIS and ex-al-Qaeda, and now he's a peace-loving guy. However, I did read and see that he's been attacking the Kurds, and any non-Islamists were in grave danger. So are we trading the evil that we know for a much worse evil? What are your thoughts?
Oh, not at all. That, to me, that is the easiest. The last question that you asked is the easiest one to answer, and that is that the whatever threat, and we can discuss the threat. I tend to think that the threat to Israel is less significant. I'm not going to say it's non-existent, but I think it's less significant than a lot of the commentary suggests. But even if I'm wrong about that, however great we think the threat is from Jolani toward Israel, or the combination of Turkey and Jolani toward Israel, it is as nothing compared to this ring of fire that Iran built around Israel. Iran was focused on destroying. We now know from the documents that the Israelis recovered from Hamas in Gaza, Iran was planning a campaign to destroy Israel, a multi-front campaign that included Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran itself, the Houthis, and so on. The Hamas on October 7th jumped the gun, didn't coordinate with the other elements of the resistance axis. Fortunately, I mean, that's kind of wrong word to use, but as a result of that, Israel has been able to fight each element of the resistance axis, each arm of the Iranian octopus, one by one. So taking out Hamas, then moving north to Hezbollah, and now the Israeli desire is to go and take down the Iranian nuclear program, something that they will not be able to do until Donald Trump comes into office. Hopefully, they will be able to. It all depends on the policy of Donald Trump, but the intention of the Israelis clearly, I mean, this has been signaled publicly by Prime Minister Netanyahu, is that the next stage in this war with Iran is to take down the Iranian nuclear program. So my strong feeling is, if you look at what that resistance axis is, Iranian nuclear program with all of these militias supplied with these disruptive military capabilities that Iran has developed. I'm talking about ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones, which when combined together in large numbers can overwhelm the defenses of anyone in the world, including the United States and including the Israelis. That threat is the threat that everyone should continue to be focused on. Jolani, whatever he feels about Israel in his heart, and I have no nothing would suggest to me that when he goes to bed at night he thinks sweet things about Israel. But his career for the last 6 years, if not longer, has been focused on destroying the Assad regime and setting up a new independent Syrian government. That task is so overwhelming for him. Even if in his heart of hearts he really wants to go try to attack Israel, he doesn't have the capabilities. Israel has just taken out all of the military capabilities in Syria. They were not significant anyway, other than from an Israeli point of view, the chemical weapons and biological weapons were the scariest thing. But the Syrian Air Force was no serious strategic threat for the Israelis. Syrian air defenses were not a problem for the Israelis. They're all gone now. It's going to take a generation or longer to rebuild the Syrian army. So to the extent that capabilities are intentions, Jolani doesn't have the capabilities. He doesn't have control of his own country. Syria is a he does not yet have full control of his country. Syria is how would I put it? It is inevitably fragmented. It's fragmented ethnically, it's fragmented religiously, it's fragmented geographically. It's really like Syria is really like 3 or 4 different countries that were cobbled together after World War I. That's one of the reasons why the Assad was such a brutal dictator. He couldn't. Whoever sits in Damascus holds this thing together with great difficulty, and it's also very porous. All of these different shards of Syrian society can make their own alliances outside of Syria with other actors. And that's what Israel has to worry about, is that some actor like not Turkey, but Iran, if Iran can pick up, even though it's been driven out now, I think the chance of this is pretty small, but if it can come in and pick up some element in the Syrian society and use that to agitate against Israel, that's a problem. But Israel, we've seen it has the capabilities to deal with that. So I just think Syria is going to be a huge challenge for whoever's ruling it for the next generation. It's going to be a huge challenge to develop military capabilities that could threaten Israel. Israel, with respect to Syria itself, is in a very good position. The key issue for Israel is to focus on Iran now and actually finish the war that it's been involved in for the last year, and not fantasize about new or get distracted, I guess is a better way of saying it, not to be distracted by new threats.
So I am actually distracted by new threats. But before we get to my distraction, let's just finish the Iran discussion somewhat. So Iran's proxies across the Middle East, with the exception of the Houthis, are very, very much degraded. The IRGC seems to be a bit of a paper tiger. Where does Iran go from here? They can't rearm Hezbollah now with Syria gone. But yet America, we just heard Joe Biden released $10 billion in aid to Iran versus, vis-a-vis the waivers that he just put into place. Can you speak to why he did that, and how will that affect anything? And is Iran basically gone at this point?
Obama and Biden and their team and the people working on the Middle East for Biden are people who worked on the Middle East for Obama. They have always believed that the best way to deal with Iran is by working to find an accommodation with it. They have not abandoned this for 1 second. People like you and like me, we see October 7th, just as I depicted it a moment ago, as part of an Iranian war against Israel. They don't see it that way. And they are going to nothing that has happened in the last year has shaken their belief that the best way to deal with Iran is diplomatically. You know, it's one of the talking points of the administration to say whenever one of the officials goes before Congress and a senator says, what is your plan to confront the Iranians over their nuclear program? The Secretary of State will say, we continue to believe that diplomacy is the best path. Well, they don't ever explain why they continue to believe that. They don't explain why diplomacy has failed until now. They just repeat this mantra over and over. Yes, there are challenges, but we continue to believe in diplomacy. What that means is they want to keep open channels. They think that confronting Iran too directly will lead to a widening of the conflict and a widening of the problems for the United States with Iran, and so they just want to avoid it.
Okay, so now we can move on to Turkey. And so here's what I'm thinking. Erdogan has always been hostile to Israel. Are we trading Iran for Turkey? And Turkey is on Israel, is very close to Israel, much closer to Israel than Iran was. So, and they have the second largest army in NATO. So, geographically, they're so close to Israel. So that's very troubling. And then part two of that is Turkey is supporting the HTS rebels, and they're supporting them against the Kurds, who are being supported by the United States. So you have two NATO countries that are effectively in a proxy war in Syria. Can you make sense of all of this for us?
Can I make sense of it? Yeah, we could talk about this forever. Let's
wait, before you
Yeah.
start, I just want to tell our listeners, for anyone who's jumping in late, we are back for part two of our conversation with Mike Doran regarding all of the events in Syria. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
So let's just talk about the Kurdish question for a second, and then we'll move to Erdogan's hostility to Israel. The United States in northeast Syria allied with the PKK. The organization that it made an alliance with is the YPG, the People's Protection Units, but the YPG is the Syrian arm of the PKK. The PKK is a terrorist organization on the U.S. State Department's list of terrorists that is dedicated to cracking up Turkey and creating a Kurdish state out of eastern Turkey. Every Turk, not just Erdogan, every Turk, including Erdogan's staunchest opponents, and well over 50% of the Kurds in Turkey detest, they hate, they revile the PKK. And they regard it as Israel as Turkey's number one enemy. The United States, Turkey's ally, allied with the PKK in Syria. And this has enraged the Turks since the Americans did it starting in 2014. And they have asked the Americans not to do it. The Americans have repeatedly refused the Turkish request. They have made promises to the Turks about restricting their support for the PKK, which they haven't kept, the Americans. For example, Joe Biden publicly said that after facilitating the occupation of Manbij by the YPG, that is the Syrian PKK, Biden promised that that the YPG would leave Manbij. This is one of the cities that Turkey had just recently, in this operation, took back, from which Turkey drove the YPG. So this is a very complex issue between the United States and Turkey, in which I personally do not think the United States comes out looking well at all. Imagine the equivalent is, imagine if the United States went into Jordan, country neighboring Israel, started building up Hamas units, arming, training, and equipping Hamas units in Jordan for some purpose other than attacking Israel, but nonetheless Hamas units. And when Israel said, excuse me, United States, why are you building up Hamas units? Then the United States would say, no, we're not doing that. We gave them a new name. And then the name the Americans gave to these units in Syria is the Syrian Democratic Forces. So the United States goes into Jordan, builds up the Jordanian Democratic Forces, which are run by Hamas. And Israel says, what are you doing? And America says, no, don't worry, this isn't Hamas, this is something else. It's the Syrian Democrat, it's the Jordanian Democratic Forces. That's what, obviously the Israelis would go crazy over this, and that's what the Turks have gone crazy. There's enough hostility toward the Turks for many different reasons that people overlook that this is what the United States did. But it did. It allied with Turkey's #1 enemy in Syria, the #1 enemy, period. But in Syria, the United States allied with it and made it stronger than it could ever possibly have been, because it took some Arab militias and put it up under the PKK leadership. Very few people understand that this is what happened. Very few Israelis understand that this is what happened, and Israelis are angry with Erdogan because of the hostility that he's shown toward them about Gaza, and so they strike back by just rhetorically expressing concern for the Kurds, but there's no such thing as the Kurds. There's the PKK, there's the YPG, of course, there's the Barzani Peshmerga in Iraq, there's Talibani. There's a whole bunch of array of different kinds of Kurds, and the fact that we may be in general sympathetic to Kurdish aspirations doesn't mean we should be supporting American policy toward the PKK, because we are alienating, as you mentioned, the second largest military in NATO, one that we're going to be dependent on for many things, including the war in Ukraine. The policy has never made any sense. And Trudy, here's the most important thing I'm going to say all day. The policy is going to fail. The policy is failing. Turkey is rising. Turkey was never going to accept this. It has always said it wouldn't accept it. It's going to get rid of it. It's going to destroy the American SDF project in northeast Syria. You can mark my words here. Whether you like it, whether you don't like it, it's going to happen, just like day is going to follow night. This is one of the reasons why this was such an unwise policy that the United States followed. You said that HTS is fighting the YPG. That's not exactly true. The Turks are moving in. They're influencing Syria through two different arms. One is HTS, which is not under their direct control, but highly influenced by them. But there's also the Syrian National Army, which the Turks put together. This is a Turkish proxy. This is totally controlled by the Turks. Turkey has accepted some 3 to 4 million, maybe 5 million Syrian refugees. So Syria is in Turkey. From among those refugees, there are Arabs, there are Kurds. The Turks have put together the Syrian National Army. These are anti-Assad Syrians of a variety of different ethnic groups, which Turkey is deploying along its border because it wants to create a buffer zone, much as Israel wants to create a buffer zone, but with Hezbollah in the north or around Gaza. The Turks want to create a buffer zone between Syria and Turkey, and they're using the Syrian National Army to do that. So the forces that pushed the YPG out of Manbij and that are moving in the direction of Kobani, these are Syrian National Army forces, which include Arabs and Kurds. the last thing I want to say here is that another reason why the Israelis should be careful about all of this expression of support for the PKK that they're engaging in, under whatever guise, whether they're calling it the YPG or the SDF, the YPG fought with the regime against the rebels. It was on the side of Assad, on the side of Iran, on the side of Russia. Not in every battle, but on battles that were of advantage to the SDF in creating a larger Kurdish autonomous region. They aligned with the regime, and they had an agreement with the regime by which their territory they would not allow their territory to be used by rebels against against the regime. So the people ruling Syria now regard that little American project in the northeast corner as a project that was directed against them, against and in favor of the Assad regime. I know I've gone on and on about this. It's complex though, and I just want to add one more thing, which I think very few people understand, but it's extraordinarily important because and it is this. The Americans Obama made the alliance with the YPG in 2014 at a moment when he was negotiating with the Iranians for the JCPOA, for the Iranian nuclear deal. That deal required the agreement of the Iranians and of the Russians. That was Obama's strategic goal, was to come to an accommodation with the Iranians and the Russians over the whole region, but starting with the nuclear program. His problem was in 2014 that ISIS went and put the town of Kobani under siege. Kobani is a Kurdish town in Syria. He was under pressure domestically, Obama, to intervene with American troops to save Kobani. He didn't want to use American troops. The alternative was to turn to Turkey and ask Turkey to come in, but he didn't want to do that, not because out of love for the Kurds. He didn't want to do that because the Turks were anti-Assad, as they are now, and if he aligned with Turkey against ISIS, he would strengthen the rebels who just destroyed, who in the last few days have just destroyed Assad. If he aligned himself with those rebels, he would queer the deal with the Russians and the Iranians, the backers of Assad, for the JCPOA. So the point here being, the alliance that the United States struck with the PKK to destroy ISIS was an alliance designed to preserve the special relationship that Obama was building with Iran. And so this is why no Israeli and no pro-Israeli should look at that little American project up there in northeast Syria and kid themselves into thinking that this is somehow an anti-Iranian move. It never was. It never has been.
So that is fascinating. That is such an interesting piece of information that I think most of us just didn't know. We have, sadly, very little time left. So I
went on a harangue. It's so hard. I apologize. It's so hard to discuss any. People talk about this with just little slogans, and they have not followed the details on the ground, which are crucial for understanding what's actually going on.
Well, no, please. This is fascinating. This is incredibly important for all of us to know. And this has been fantastic. But I want to ask you to briefly answer the next question.
Right.
Okay. Is the fall of Assad and the emergence of this new Turkey stronghold good or bad for Israel?
It's on balance, it's good for Israel. Absolutely. Because the rise of Turkish power is tremendously discomforting to Iran and Russia, as we've just seen. I mean, the Israelis and the Turks working in parallel without talking to each other just destroyed the resistance axis of Iran in Syria. The Israelis hollowed out Hezbollah, and then the Turks came in and got rid of the regime. Imagine what could happen, Trudy, if the United and they did it without talking to each other, and they did it without the United States supporting them. This is not, the United States was not in favor of any of this and tried to work against it. The United States was telling the Israelis all the time when they were attacking Hezbollah to be more measured, because they wanted to get the ceasefire and stop the war in Gaza. They didn't want the war to go north, and they didn't want the Israelis to go into Gaza to begin with, and they didn't want the Israelis to escalate against Hezbollah. So America was never in favor of this, and it happened, and it's good for America, good for Israel. What if the United States said, wow, we have these two allies in the region. They don't get along very well. They find each other threatening, or the Israelis find the Turks threatening. What if we worked with them to shape the region, and we operated as a shock absorber between them to keep their conflicts from getting in the way of each other? They don't border each other. There's never been any exchange of fire between them, unlike between Iran and Israel. What if we just work as a shock absorber and did that? We could organize the whole region, put it all under an American security umbrella, policed by our friends. We could do that. We could get rid of the Iranian threat in very short order. It's just a matter of having that vision. A lot of Israelis and pro-Israelis are working against that vision because they see Turkey as such a threat. But if you look at it from the point of view of the United States cannot build a regional order on Israel and the Kurds, or Israel and the YPG. It can't do that. It won't work. It has to work with Turkey. Turkey is indispensable. There are some challenges that it represents, and the United States has to be aware of those. Israel has to be aware of those, but they can be managed, because just like I said about al-Jolani, Erdogan has so many things on his priority list before hostility to Israel even crosses his mind. He's going to be very, very busy working on that. Turkey is a very complex thing. It's much bigger than Erdogan. Even Erdogan is more complex than just his hostility to Israel. We need to understand this thing, Turkey. We need to understand that its rise has many benefits for Israel and some challenges. And we have to fashion policies, Israeli policies and American policies, that take advantage of the benefits and minimize the challenges. But if we just see it as a big jihadi threat coming at us, it's inaccurate, and the things that we're going to do in response are going to make the problem worse rather than better.
Wow. Thank you so much for that insight. And I can't believe it, but we are out of time.
I can believe it because I talk so much. I
No,
apologize. I
please
I don't know how to say these things in a concise way.
No, we really love hearing from you. We hope that you will come back again. Please always continue to voice your opinions and to share your knowledge with us. This wraps up another week's episode of Nothing But the Truth. A huge, huge thank you to Mike Doran, whose deep expertise in the Middle East shed invaluable light on the complexities of the circumstances unfolding as we speak. You provided a clearer understanding of its intricate dynamics and the far-reaching impact that it has on the entire world. So, Mike, thank you so, so much, and I hope you will come back. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in to Nothing But the Truth this week. Don't forget to join us every Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. for another compelling episode of Nothing But the Truth. If you've missed any part of the show or you want to visit past shows, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Trudy Stern, and remember, you'll always get the truth here.